Hey everybody, this is Levi. Um, I've been looking at a lot of the posts that are showing up on this group lately about having some difficulties with things not turning out the way they want, starting to have hair slip, and a bunch of other things. And I thought I'd just pass on some of the ways that I tan, and you can see what I do, and really see that it's not as complicated as people make it. Probably the most important thing is actually the hide preparation, how you start out. I'm specifically addressing some concerns that I've seen from one poster about asking if you need to flesh it, all the things you need to do with pickling, and several questions. In reality, I've never found a single hide that I had to pickle. You can, but you certainly aren't required to. I don't really pickle any of my hides, and they all wind up fine. You do need to take into account kind of the areas that you live, how much humidity you have, what temperatures you have. I happen to live in southeast Arizona, and it's pretty dry here, and we don't have a lot of issues with slippage, other than if we do it in way too warm of weather, and then you'll have that. But I'm going to show you a couple things. The first thing is I have a fox. I didn't have rabbit hides, which is what I've seen most people post about. But I do have a fox today. I wanted to show you some of the important things about the hide, because it is the single most important part about getting a good, soft, supple tan is actually making sure that hide is ready to receive that tan. Okay, one other thing we're going to do before we actually go and look at the fox and see the condition of the hide and everything is talk about the formula that you can use to tan hides. Now, my favorite is if I can have the brains to do a brain tan. I really like that. But they're just not always available, and sometimes you have a project you want to work in at the time. I found that egg yolks work extremely well, better than I ever thought they would. Just egg yolks by themselves, not the whites, and a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of some kind of dish soap. I use Dawn dish soap, I think. I'm going to show you kind of a batch that I have made up here. And see the consistency. This one is actually a lot more liquidy than I like. I like them a little thicker than this. I think there's about 5 or 6 eggs in here. For something like a fox or rabbit, you really only need like 2 eggs. That would work just fine. As far as how much oil and how much dish soap, when I have about 4 to 6 eggs, I use about a good tablespoon or more of oil and a little less than that of the dish soap. It's not really required to have an exact recipe, guys. As long as you have the eggs, this actually works pretty well. All right. Okay, I wanted to get to a place that was a little better lit to be able to show you what this hide looks like. This particular fox hide, you can see where you see some of the blue and some of the white. I wanted to show you how clean that you really need to get it to be kind of the base and the bare minimum for you to be able to do the tan. So another thing I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you an area that I actually haven't completely fleshed out, so you get an idea. If you have a rabbit hide or whatever it is that you're working with, I want to show you these areas right here. You can see it's a little more dingy. It's kind of some different color. If you let me see if you look closely, if you can see, there's a membrane there. All of that stuff kind of has to come off in order to be able to have a really good tan. Now, I will tell you that this fox, as it stands, would tan up perfectly. There wouldn't be really anything wrong with it. But you will have to work the areas that have this kind of stuff very well. And there are certain areas that you can get into where this would not take a tan with the humidity and different things. So all that stuff, that right there is probably a good representation. Around the hole right there, that stuff, that needs to come off. That's a little extra flesh. So I'll go and I'll show you how to get some of that flesh off if you haven't done it before. Okay, one of the things that I wanted to do is show if you're going to do this a little bit more seriously and you're going to do multiple hides, you are going to need to get some tools that are kind of specific for this. This is a fleshing beam. To give you kind of an idea of size, here's my hand, and I think this is I want to say it's an 8-inch beam. And it's hardwood, it's rounded, it works really good. You can use PVC pipes to do the same thing, but it is a great tool. The other one is this fleshing knife right down here. I'm not sure if you can see it. It is a Necker. It's quite wide, and it's got a sharp side and a dull side, one for pushing some of the flesh and one for shaving. If you really want to see, there's lots and lots of videos on YouTube about fleshing that will show you some better detail. But I really kind of wanted to do this video for people who didn't have any of those things handy at all. And so I wanted to show you some of the things that I'm going to use today to do this if you don't have any of these kind of materials and you want to still do this, what I found that works really good is just a funnel, right? Just a funnel from like an oil funnel. I'm putting this Fox on it right now. I'm going to do a little section right here, just a little section that you can see that the fat is still there. We're going to go ahead and scrape some of that and let you guys see how that actually works here in a second. The other thing is, you may not have exactly the knife, but you don't necessarily have to have a razor sharp skinny knife. You can actually do it with something as simple, believe it or not, as a ruler. I'm going to show you. I'm going to use a ruler and scrape some of this fat off and show you that it actually works quite well. And all you got to do is have some pressure on this hide as you're pushing. As you push down, you're going to see some of the fat and hide and everything push off of it. Now, this is not ideal in any way, shape, or form, but this is, if you have to, you can see that this actually will do the job. It is not what you want to do long term, but it will help get your hide pretty free, especially if you have, like a fox or a rabbit or something thinner. You can get these hides pretty clean with something as simple as a ruler and a oil funnel. So it can be done. I'm not going to do a lot more to this fox because I think there's more important things to show you about the tanning process. But I am going to show you this finished hide, so I'm going to get it finished up and show you what it looks like when I'm ready to tan it. All right, thanks. Okay, the final thing I'm going to show you before we actually get to the tanning process is I actually like to kind of score the hide before I put the tanning solution on it. I just take something like this, just a brush, kind of a pet brush, and if you just take it and kind of score it, especially if it's a little closer to being a little drier. This one's actually still just a little bit wet. But I can take this, I can take a wire brush, and I'm going to score it a little bit, and it seems to help open up some of those fibers or pores. I'm not exactly sure the entirety of the science, but I do know that I've done hides with it and without it, and this seems to work. If I'll go through and scratch it up pretty good, it seems to help receive that tan a little bit better. Okay, now we're to the tanning part, and I apologize about any video quality here. I'm outside and there's cars coming by and everything, but I'm going to show you that, for most animals, if they're skinned this way, if they're cased where they're whole the whole way through, this becomes really easy. If you split them right down the middle and you've got a totally open skin, there's only really one difference here, and that is when you get all done, you would fold the side over to where, if this was the hair side here, you'd fold everything over to where the hair side's sticking out and leave it once you've applied this tan. This is a lot more liquidy than what I usually really like to use, but I am gonna try and get this on here and show you that, the main thing is work it in, get it in, especially these areas like real small things like the face. The face is what I'll probably apply this to the most once I've got it worked into this area, if you want that face area nice. A lot of times, if you just want the middle section of the hide, just work this in, and it's going to look like there's not very much there, because like I said, this one's a little bit more liquidy consistency. I wound up adding just a little bit of water to help kind of soften this up, and I added too much. Usually you want kind of a thicker consistency, a paste where it sticks on here, but what I'll do is I'll put a little bit and then let it dry a little bit, and put a little bit more and let it dry a little bit. Bottom line is, if you get this thing nice and covered and you let it set anywhere from 30 minutes on, you're going to have a tanned product. Even as little as 30 minutes, it will be tanned. I feel like if you leave it a little longer, overnight or something like that, it tends to turn out better, and you have a lot less working to do back in your hide. But this is really as simple as it is, folks. It's not very complicated to do tanning. I think people worry about hair slipping and a lot of things, and it's really just comes down to, did you prep your hide good? Did you really flesh it good? And do you work this hide in this tanning solution into all the pores and places that it needs to be? And then let the tanning do the work. Let it set. Let that really penetrate and do a good job. And then the final portion, when we get this done, is going to be to make sure that when you do the stretching and the breaking of the hide, that you do it at the right time. And that's been the single biggest difference for me in getting a soft hide versus getting one that
is soft but has a lot of crinkles and a lot of crackly sound to it. And so we will come back to this when I've got it ready to just put away for the day. All right.
Okay, the final thing I'm going to show you here in the tanning process is you can just let it sit with the tanning agent on it, as I showed you earlier, and just let it get to completely dry. However, what I like to do is with all the leftover egg mixture that I have, or brain or whatever else, I like to put it in some, I usually get the water actually pretty warm and mix it in and then let it cool off. And I'm going to go ahead and put this fox down in here. Now this water was, this was a kind of a twofold mission. This water's got a lot of gunk in it, and it didn't originally, but I dropped the fox right before, right as I was taking him off the board that I had. I wound up dropping him and he got in the dirt and it stuck to all the eggs. So this water's not going to be able to be used for another tan, but you know what, it'll be fine for this. So I'm going to show you that after you get that hide kind of worked in there, take this little board, and I try and make sure I've got as much of it covered. I try to get it pinched down with something, because you don't want to put too much water. I usually use a couple of gallons in this 5-gallon bucket and make sure that it's all sitting down there. And I'll let that sit down in that solution for, probably another hour or so. You can definitely let it sit overnight, and this is usually the point at which I do that. Like I said, this is not required to do this last liquid step. I've just found it to be that it cleanses the hide good, and it seems to work out well for me, so I've replicated it over and over. But anyway, we're gonna stop, and the next time we'll get it pulled out and show you about drying and breaking the skin.
Okay, so it's been sitting for over an hour here, and like I said, you can definitely let this sit overnight. And it does work better. I'm just showing you the simplified, faster version of a lot of this stuff. But at this point, you know, on one hand I could say, congratulations, you have a tanned hide. At this point, it is tanned. Now, if you let it set, it would turn to almost kind of like a rawhide. What we want to do is we really want to get it to dry out really well. And I'll tell you that a lot of the times, if it's case skin like this, I'll actually turn it first side out, wring it out really good, and put it in a towel or something like that, and really dry it off, and then turn it back the other way to let this side get pretty dry, so I can go ahead and break it. But what I would suggest is there's a lot of different videos that'll show you how to get it really wrung out, but I'm going to have this wrung out and dried pretty good, and then let it set, and the next time you see this, it will be ready to do the breaking.
Okay, couldn't figure out how to film this last part. I'm going to try and do this as close as possible and show you here. This last part of the tanning is probably the thing that actually makes you or breaks you in terms of having a soft pelt. And it is the breaking of the pelt. Now, I've let it dry purposely, not all the way in some places, and probably enough in others to show you the difference, so you can get an idea of when it's a good time to pull and break these fibers versus when it's too wet. So I kind of let it drip dry, and I want you to see some of these areas like this. If you listen, it's scratchy. And you'll see some areas are kind of white and some areas are still kind of gray. I'm going to show you, hopefully here. I'm going to try and pull this open, and as I pull it apart here, you'll see that it goes white, and then it might retain its original color. And what's happening is if it goes white and it stays, then you're good. That part is tan. Like you can see a little section right in here, it's staying white and it's not scratchy, it's nice and soft. So a couple things that I use something blunt. Some people use a post or whatever, and I run it under these areas, and as I push it against the back and I really run it hard, you can see the color change. And if it will stay, then that means that area is dry enough and will hold the breaking. And so I can feel that area right there is going to be nice, and it won't wrinkle anymore. It'll have a nice tanned area. Now I'm going to go to another area that you'll get to see it turn white. You can see it turn nice and white, but when I let it go, it's probably going to go back to its original color because this area out here is still kind of wet. This is the end of your feet, and this area stays wet kind of the longest. So if I try and pull it, it will turn white, but it'll go back, and you won't really have that part broken yet. So you got to wait for that to get a little bit drier. In the meantime, I can get the area around it really kind of soft and work it. And you can see how white that area around it is going to be. That area right there is nice and tan, and it's super soft and supple, and you don't have the scratchy area. And this, like I said, last part was kind of hard to film. I hope this comes out right, but I'm going to keep working with this and hopefully show you the end product. But work it over something. I've seen people that have a post and really work it back and forth really fast. I don't recommend that. I think that what you ought to do is actually get to a place where you can work slow enough to see that color change. You really need to see it work good. And if you feel like it's gotten too dry but it's not breaking, dampen a cloth and re-wet the area. Dampen it and let it get, even if you have to completely soak it and get it all wet again, and then keep working it back. You'll eventually find that right time to do stuff. It's the hardest part of doing this. It's a bunch of trial and error. But when you get it right, you'll have beautifully tan furs. And I'm going to come back and show you this versus another fox that I did where I didn't do this part. I broke it too early, and I didn't wait for it to dry to where it's got the right amount of dryness where that stays. And I'll show you that and get back to you. Okay, you will frequently run into, when you're getting close down to the end, you'll see some areas kind of like this over here that are just, they never did really get white, and you're not quite to getting those stretched out. You can see there's a lot of good area in here that's really done pretty well. Some of these edges are, they're still going to be a little bit wet, as well as this little area right here for some reason. But here's a tip: take your brush, or even a wire brush is even better. And let me see if I can hold this down. On these areas that are having a little bit more trouble to break in the first place, if you work them back and forth, if you'll work this area with the brush, it will actually do a lot of the work for you. So you can get down and say, okay, this area that was, before it was having some trouble, it's pretty well done. There's still some fine work to do on this stuff. You can see there's still some crinkle in it. But this one is pretty well tanned up. You can hear there's still a little crinkle, and that's because there still are some wet parts and some parts that have to be worked over. But ultimately, this is pretty close to being tanned at this point. I'll finish up and show you the two differences here. I have two foxes here that I've done at different times. This is one of the first foxes I ever did, and this is the one that we did today. And I'm going to go and talk a little bit about it, but mostly show you. The difference here is this one, you can hear it. It's all crinkly in this one. Very little crinkle, it's almost just like a garment. The softness and how well it's done throughout. Both of these foxes are pretty excellent, but this one is a lot better because of when we chose to actually break the skin on it, and some of those things that we talked about earlier, like using the brush to go over it, really makes the difference and made this fox quite a bit better. And anyway, that's all that we have for the tanning videos today. Hope that it helps you, that you learn something, and we'll see you next time.